As coronavirus cases surge across the U.S., the number of first-time unemployment claims took a slight dip last week. According to the Labor Department, an additional 803,000 Americans filed for first-time unemployment. That is actually down about 89,000 claims from the previous week. The figures, however, point to an economy that is struggling to deal with the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. So for more on this, I want to bring in Ted Oakley. He is a managing partner at Oxbow Advisors. Ted, so we have seen a slight dip in first-time unemployment claims, but the numbers are still pretty high. Your assessment of the numbers, when you look at it, what does it mean about the current state of the U.S. economy?
Well, Anne-Marie, we look at a 4-week average a lot. It's still over 800,000. But what's really happening is the employers that are, say, under 400 to 500 employees, that's where you're losing ground with those independents. And I think if that continues to be the case, they won't be coming off that much.
That is very interesting to me. Does it feel like with the pandemic, it's sort of, creeping into employers that have sort of larger groups of employees? What I'm trying to say is I remember sort of early on we were talking about how really large businesses and corporations really benefited from some of the federal intervention, and so they were able to keep a lot of people on the payroll, but smaller businesses were really feeling the pinch. Are you seeing sort of mid-level businesses being affected now in a way that they weren't at the beginning of the pandemic?
Well, somewhat. I mean, most of them, if you want to use that number, say 500 employees, I think that would be a fairly mid-level business. But you're seeing, it seems like it skews toward the lower end. And so these independent small businesses, they've gone about, a lot of them have gone about as long as they can. And we're starting to see the closures now in businesses. And that's where you're seeing the drop off in employment.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So then that brings me to this, $900 billion coronavirus stimulus package. The president, it was hoped that he would sign it. He's kind of threatening not to because he, frankly, thinks that the $600 stimulus checks are not good enough, that's not going to help your average American. He wants a $2,000 check handed out. What's your take on this $600? The president's not alone. A lot of people didn't think $600 would go far enough, especially this far into the pandemic.
Well, Anne-Marie, if you look at what the New York Fed came out with and said that under the former stimulus, that about half of that money went into savings and to pay down debt, which isn't all that bad. But it's hard to say whether this would go full into the into the economy or not. If it goes like the last time, what would happen is we would put more money into savings and probably pay down a little more debt. But it's hard to say if they would do it the same as they did on the first stimulus. Looking into it, 600, 2,000, if they're not spending it all, then you won't see it in the economy.
Despite, the talk of a lot of people being unemployed, there were some sectors that saw a boost, that typically see a boost during the sort of seasonal job hiring during this time of year. Obviously, anything online, delivery, they would have been doing some temporary hiring. But come the new year, when we are facing, many experts believe possibly another surge in coronavirus cases, but also an end to these seasonal contracts. Do you expect that we're going to see an increase in those unemployment numbers?
Anne-Marie, you could have that because if you look at the courier and messenger numbers, they were really up the last 2 months, just like you were saying. And that's obviously going to fall off in January and February. It's hard to say where we'll go with housing. It's been on fire, but it's starting to slow a little bit in the last 2 or 3 weeks. If you put all that together, you could have some slowing going into the new year.
And of course, if the rates of coronavirus cases continue to rise the way some experts are warning it will after the holiday season, cities and states, the expectation is that we're going to see tougher coronavirus lockdown restrictions put in place. What sort of impact do you think that's going to have on the economy?
I think it's tougher this time because what happens is you have a lot of these small businesses that are just barely alive, and they're staying in business, but it's really tight. If you go into a situation where a full lockdown again, then it pushes them really over the cliff. And I think that's the trouble we run into right now with the lockdown. I'm not I'm not really saying that we should all go out and do a lot of things right now. It's just that what happens in these lockdowns is really business slows down a lot. And so we have a lot of companies that are right on the edge now. So I think it would be really tough if we went into full lockdown right now.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder, you know, the remedies or the assistance that was put in place at the beginning of this pandemic, the first CARES Act, helped a lot of people and businesses hang on, but they're hanging on by their fingertips. And so now, you know, they're not just 1 month behind in their rent, they might be 4 months behind, or they, you know, are finding that they had to spend an awful lot of money in the interim to keep their business open. If you were a restaurant, maybe you put up an outdoor structure and that costs a lot of money. And so you are even further in debt than you thought you would have been. And so the help that you needed before is not going to have the same impact, even if you receive it now, like the stimulus package that, you know, the president is saying is not enough.
Well, that's true. And, you know, when I leave bank meetings, I'm on a bank board, and so I get to see a lot of what goes on. And what you'll see is that a lot of these companies that we've been in, and every bank is deferring payments to a number of people. It's not going away. You know, everybody thought that maybe those deferred payments, principal payments, that sort of thing would change, but it's not really changing all that much. So we're going to have to see how that, I think you're right on the money on what you said on that particular item.
Ted Oakley, pleasure talking to you, sir. Even though, unfortunately, the topic isn't the most uplifting topic, we got to take a good hard look at the numbers so people know what's happening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anne Marie.